The New York Giants are quietly putting together one of the best off seasons of 2024, and nobody's talking about it. And look, I get it. The Giants aren't exactly the sexiest team to talk about right now. Their quarterback situation is a bit of a mess. We'll talk about that in this video. They had to let go of their best player this offseason. That's never appetizing to look at. And look, to be very clear and fair about this take, it's not like I think the Giants are going to the Super Bowl or anything crazy like that. I know this is the time of year where everybody thinks every team is going to the Super Bowl. If we can set some realistic, fair, reasonable expectations, I think I can explain to you why the Giants had a really good, super duper, positively positive offseason that's moving them in the right direction for future seasons. Before we get to the content, please be sure to like and subscribe to help the channel grow, but also turn on those notifications because you do not want to miss what I have stored for you in June. I think if you're a head coach in the NFL, you preach competition, competition, competition. I don't care if you're expecting to be the best team in the NFL. I don't care if you're expected to be the worst team in the NFL. I think that every locker room should have a competitor's mentality. I think that starts from the head coach level down. In the front office of an organization, I think it's a little bit different. I think the front office is allowed to think things like, all right, I don't see us winning a lot of games this year, but maybe we can get a high draft pick. Maybe we can make some trades. Maybe we can stockpile some picks and start to build something for the future. I think the front office, it's okay to look a little ahead. Look no further than the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions went from winning 3 games to winning 9 games and missing the playoffs on a tiebreaker to going to the NFC Championship. That was over the course of 3 years. And yes, head coach did have something to do with that. Dan Campbell, the culture he built there over the last 3 years, that's nothing to scoff at. But you know who gets overlooked in the whole Lions conversation because of how good of a job Dan Campbell's done? Brad Holmes gets overlooked. The general manager for the Lions gets overlooked. He was brought in the exact same year that they brought in Dan Campbell. Now look, the Giants are far from a perfect comparison to the Lions. I only bring the Lions up because they proved that you can do a major rebuild in 3 years. If the Giants think that they've got the right head coach in Brian Daboll, and I think they might, they think they've got the right general manager in Joe Schoen, which is probably still up in the air right now, but I think this offseason definitely helped his case, then maybe Giants owner John Mara should be a little bit patient here and give them some time to build this thing the way that the Lions took a little bit of time to build their thing. I think that build started this offseason. I don't think it started last offseason. I think it started this offseason, 2024. But before I get to the brilliance of 2024, I do have to bring up the missteps of 2023 that led us here. In the 2023 offseason, the Giants were in a position where they had Daniel Jones, the quarterback, and they had Saquon Barkley, the running back, both at the end of their contracts. So they had to decide what they wanted to do, who they wanted to tag, who they wanted to give a long-term extension to, because giving a long-term extension to both wasn't financially feasible. Saquon Barkley was coming off of a season where he rushed for 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. Daniel Jones was coming off of a season where he threw 15 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions. And look, even though the Giants did make the playoffs in 2022, their point differential was -6 on the year. Their offense was ranked 15th in scoring. I wouldn't say that the Giants were a success story that year. Yeah, they made the playoffs. Nobody thought they were making it past the first round. Definitely not past the second round. But after a season where you make the playoffs for the first time in a while, I do get why you'd feel conflicted between, okay, what do we do as far as quarterback goes, as far as our star running back goes? What do we do? I get the conflict. And I know it's been said before, but I think the right move was probably to go with whichever player has been more consistent for you over a period of time. Saquon Barkley had just gone over 1,000 yards for the 3rd time in his 5 years for you. And one of the 2 times that he missed that 1,000-yard mark, he only got to play in 2 games that year. Daniel Jones was a lot less impressive to me. Yeah, in his rookie season, he threw for more than 20 touchdowns. Since then, hasn't been back to the 20 touchdown range. And sure, he only threw 5 interceptions that season, but he also only threw 15 touchdowns to go with it, which is not that many, and that was with his career high amount of pass attempts. Not to mention, running backs are cheaper than quarterbacks, so the Giants could have signed Barkley and then tagged Daniel Jones, and with the money they save, they could have filled in some holes on the team. Bottom line, if it was me, I would have used the franchise tag on Daniel Jones. I would have figured, you know what, if he plays great, we can give him a long-term contract next year. If we can't figure it out with him, then we can tag him one more time and give ourselves another year to figure out the contract. If he only plays okay, then maybe he's willing to sign for a little bit less money on like a 2-year deal or something. And if he doesn't play well, then we can part ways with him for free. And more importantly, with that strategy, we get to lock down Saquon Barkley, our best player, for a few more years. Giants elected to go the other way around. They franchise tagged Saquon Barkley. They signed Daniel Jones to a 4-year, $160 million contract, $92 million fully guaranteed. And I think that was a compound mistake. Unfortunately for the Giants, that wasn't the only mistake of the 2023 offseason. In 2022, the Giants' best receiver was Darius Slayton, who ranked 47th in the league in receiving yards. Their solution to their problems at wide receiver was to bring in Jamison Crowder, who was coming off of a season where he accounted for 60 total yards for the Buffalo Bills. The Giants actually wound up cutting him before they even got to the regular season. And they held on to Sterling Shepard and Wan'Dale Robinson, who combined for less than 500 yards. That was their receiving core. Granted, they did bring in Darren Waller, who at the time was regarded as one of the better tight ends in the league. Unfortunately, that has yet to pay off, and he's actually mulling retirement at the moment. Oh, home run Mariners. Nice. So the result of that offseason was the Giants wound up being the second worst offense in the league in terms of receiving yards, behind only the Carolina Panthers. So after an uninspiring 2023 offseason that bled into an uninspiring 2023 regular season, I actually really like the Giants' 2024 offseason. In the 2024 offseason, the Giants let Saquon Barkley go. And while that's far from ideal, the fact of the matter is, look, the Giants tied their hands a year ago when they didn't give Barkley a contract. So that's the position they put themselves in now. That's where we're at right now. No sense in looking to the past anymore. So what can we do to make the best of the current situation? You got to let Barkley walk. Sometimes letting your best player go is the right move for the organization. Especially when we found out what the Eagles gave Barkley. They gave him a $37 million contract. There's no way the Giants could have matched that. Like I said, I don't love it, but I get it. Let's get to the good moves that the Giants made this offseason, though. They brought in Drew Lock. That's a quarterback with starting experience for the Broncos and the Seahawks over the last 5 years. He's somebody who can challenge Daniel Jones for the starting job. And as I said in a video that I made last week, remember, there was a key piece of information that actually came from John Schneider this offseason. He said that before the Sam Howell trade, he actually did want to re-sign Drew Lock to be a backup to Geno Smith again. But the Giants assured Lock that he would have an opportunity to compete for the starting job. And when you look at his contract, it pretty much says as much. If he takes 70% of the snaps, there's an additional $1 million in there for him. Performance-based incentives, he's got team incentives regarding playoff berths. That's worth up to another $2 million. So Drew's making a minimum of $5 million this year, but he can get up to $8 million if he's the starter and hits all the benchmarks. That probably means the Giants are open to that possibility, but the Giants do have an opportunity to put that massive contract mistake behind them because they can get out of Daniel Jones' contract next offseason, and all they have to eat is $22 million in dead cap. Which, barring some miraculous turnaround in 2024, I'm going to go ahead and say that's the most likely scenario. So knowing that you're most likely moving on from Jones next year, the Giants really do have an incentive to see what they have in Drew Lock. All right, what else did the Giants do this offseason? Well, how about their 2024 NFL draft? They addressed wide receiver. Yeah, I know that last year they grabbed Hyatt in the 3rd round. He only wound up accounting for 373 yards for the Giants. I don't know that anyone views him as somebody that's going to be their #1 receiver at any point in time, But in this year's draft, they were able to grab Malik Neighbors in the first round. That's somebody who very well could be a #1 wide receiver for the team. But offensively, they weren't done there. At running back, they grabbed Tyrone Tracy Jr., who actually started his career as a wide receiver and transitioned to running back, which I really like for the Giants because it could help them out on third downs. Whether it's Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, it could be really helpful having a running back that's got speed and he's got hands. So I like that move. I like that they brought in Theo Johnson at tight end because, as I said earlier, currently Darren Waller, their tight end, is contemplating retirement. So at least you've got another tight end now to plug that hole with. But I also like what the Giants did on defense. They grabbed a safety, a corner, and a linebacker. And that, by the way, brings us to the best move that the Giants made this offseason. That's got to be their trade for Brian Burns. This is a linebacker that reportedly the Rams last offseason offered 2 first-rounders and a second-rounder for. The Giants got to trade for him for a 2024 second and fifth, as well as a conditional 2025 fifth in exchange for Burns and a 2024 fifth. A lot of fifths involved in this trade. Net, let's break it down. Fifth cancels out fifth. Okay, so it cost the Giants a second and a fifth for Burns. The Giants then turned around and immediately locked Burns up through 2028. I just think that makes sense. When you trade for a guy like that, the intention is, no, we're trading for you because we want you here long term. We're not trading for you for this year, especially if you're the Giants, who I think are in a rebuild. It doesn't make sense to trade for a guy for 1 year when you're in a rebuild unless it's a bridge type of situation. Look, and the bottom line, I do think it's important to remember that the Giants are trying to climb out of cap hell right now. They've only got $1.1 million in cap space for this season. They're only set to have like $14 million in cap space next season. It's a little rough, but I think they've made some really good moves for the future. And you never know. With this upgraded offense for the Giants, in Mike Kafka's second season as the offensive coordinator, it's pretty reasonable to think that maybe he takes a step forward. Maybe he can get Daniel Jones back on track. Maybe Drew Lock takes over as the starter and is able to get you 8, maybe 9 wins, maybe even a playoff appearance this year. You know, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. If you ask me to bet on it, I'd say no, I don't think the Giants make the playoffs, but I do think they take positive steps in the right direction. I think that this could be like year 1 of the Dan Campbell era for Detroit. Yeah, it might be an ugly year, but they're going to start to build a winning culture. I think they might start to do things the right way now because they're setting themselves up to do that. I think most likely they're going to be moving on from Daniel Jones next offseason. And when they do that, ideally they'll be in a position where they have a team built that's ready for the right quarterback to step in. Maybe that's Dak Prescott in free agency. Maybe they go into the draft. Maybe Drew Lock proves himself to be the starter. Don't know. Any of these things are possible. Maybe they trade for a guy. Maybe Kirk Cousins is available again because the Falcons have decided, hey, it's time to put Penix in. Don't know. There's a lot of possibilities for next year as far as quarterback goes. Expect big things for the Giants in 2025 because of their offseason in 2024. But let me know what you think in the comments section, especially if you're a Giants fan. I definitely want to hear from you. I do reply to as many comments as I can because I actually love talking football. I also love getting you guys' feedback. Tell me why my video sucks, and I'll say thank you. I'll catch you guys next time. Later.